One hotly debated topic on social media these days is seed oils.
Yeah.
Which is not a monolith. There's a lot of nuance, I think, that is now thankfully being brought to the table. But you're somebody who's talked about the potential harms to come from over-consuming these kinds of novel fats for a long time. You were very prescient in your talking about this issue. So is there anything that you want to address with regards to them? I mean, like, would you say that they're the dietary boogeyman that they're often made out to be on social media?
So you use the term nuance, and that's 100% true. All these things exist on a spectrum. So oils are a good example of, there's not just great oils and horrible oils. There are fine and adequate and good oils somewhere in between. Much of it depends on the use of the oil. So you might take a great oil and then and cook with it beyond a smoke point and then turn it into a horrible choice. You might take some of these seed oils that are middle of the spectrum, like high oleic sunflower oil, which I think is a pretty interesting oil, and I would not shy away from it under most circumstances. And I could see using that in certain prepared meals and salad dressings and things like that.
I totally agree. I wouldn't use it in place of extra virgin olive oil, but it has a fatty acid profile very similar to avocado oil. So I would conceivably use it, if I had to for whatever reason. Use it in place of like an avocado oil.
Yes, exactly. And some of the oils, the corn oil, the soybean oil, the canolas, they've been more castigated for the processing methods than for the linoleic acid content or the whatever Franken oils that are in there as a result of having gone through that processing. So what we're seeing again is we see the pendulum swinging back. So it was like in the 50s and 60s, margarine was the way to go, and then the 60s and 70s and 80s, get rid of butter because it's horrible for your heart, and then it turns out margarine wasn't so great, didn't taste good to begin with. And then butter came in, and that was great. And then the seed oil thing, which I helped promote, and I think Kate Shanahan was probably the leader of that whole thing. And now I'm starting to be open-minded to the notion that there are some of these oils that were in this horrible list might be okay under certain circumstances, right? And it's the methods of preparation, it's the choice of use as a factor in whether or not they should be, avoided at all cost.
Yeah, very interesting.
There's a new one, the algae oil, which is I think algae oil has the best profile of any oil I've ever seen.
It's like all mono, it's all oleic acid.
It's all mono, and it tastes like butter, but it's buttery, I should say. So it doesn't have this biased taste that it imparts to food. Like coconut oil has is great to cook with, but you got to have the right food you're cooking with. Otherwise, it tastes like bologna fudge ice cream or something. So
yeah. My stance is that I agree. Like high oleic sunflower oil, I think is fine, but I would still have concern. I definitely avoid the soybean oil, the corn oil. I see no reason to bring them into my house. The primary oils that I use are extra virgin olive oil and avocado oil. And I still and also there are seed oils like sesame seed oil, which I think is a very healthful culinary oil.
Sure, in the right context, it's amazing.
Yeah, I still definitely will. I still have concern about the the consumption of these highly refined, bleached, and deodorized linoleic acid seed oils, because I just don't think that we have. I think that the observational data that a lot of the pro seed oil advocates will use is confounded.
Yeah.
It's endlessly confounded by healthy user bias. A lot of these oils, corn oil, still are adorned in the supermarkets by the heart check logo.
For sure.
Right? So it's hard to tease out like the healthy user bias aspect there, that a lot of people have been told that they're the healthier alternative, and so they'll preferentially use those along with maybe being more inclined to exercise, take a multivitamin, etc. And also some of the healthiest foods in the supermarket are rich in linoleic acid, so like nuts and seeds.
Yeah,
I think are a perfectly healthy food. So I think like the observational data is, confounded, and the RCT, the human clinical data, I think is equivocal. Like it's kind of all over the place. And I simply just it's hard for me to trust. They tend to be short term. They tend to fixate on one, singular biomarker that's proximally related to cardiovascular disease, right? Like LDL cholesterol. Like, yes, they reduce LDL cholesterol compared to saturated fat. We know that. But what about,
And by the way, even that is like, okay, does that make it a good thing? Like LDL cholesterol reduction isn't necessary. Like,
what does it do to the quality of the LDL particle? That's still
there's that question. There's that, and there's still the overarching question: is lower LDL necessarily across the board a better thing? I'm not sure it's a better thing. It's just a different thing.
Yeah.
But is it a better thing? And does it, demonstrably lower your risk for cardiovascular disease, for instance?
Yeah, I had Kevin Bass on the podcast recently, who's a scientist who we've become friends, and he said something super interesting. He said that humans, because we're bipedal, we tend to have higher blood pressure, and that promotes atherosclerosis. Like atherosclerosis might be sort of one double-edged sword aspect of what it means to be human to some degree. I mean, it's no secret that it's the number one killer, of Americans today. And so the idea that we should be, striving towards newborn levels of ApoB and LDL, doesn't really make a lot of sense because at what cost, right, would those levels be achieved?
Yeah.
Well, you'd have to go vegan to achieve those levels. And we know that being vegan is associated with a whole slew of other risks, worse mental health, worse bone health, less muscle mass.
Yes.
And the necessity to rely on ultra-processed foods to meet your protein targets. And so I'm not, I still maintain, and and again, these seed oils are primarily the quote unquote benefit of consuming them is in a very specific and narrow context. And it's a context that relies on a few, I think, assumptions, like the assumption, as we've talked about, that lower LDL is inherently better. But we don't know how these seeds fats affect the brain long term.
Yeah.
They have very easy entry into the brain. They generate, these OXLAMs, oxidized linoleic acid metabolites, which we know are harmful. Their production often, the high heat that they're often exposed to in the cooking environment, which is the context in which they're promoted for use, right, generates really noxious compounds like aldehydes, like acrolein, 4-hydroxynonenal, which is associated,
You've been doing your research. I love it.
We see higher levels in the brains of that
in
people with Alzheimer's disease. And so I just think to say that these are like what Whole30 recently did, that gave them the universal green light.
Yeah.
I think that's irresponsible, and I think that's I don't think that's the way to go.
Yeah. So as I said, I think these exist on the spectrum. I'm open to examining each one on the merits of it. And for example, hyalinic sunflower, possibly safflower, and as you go down the line, let's look at them individually, not just for their fatty acid profile and their manufacturing process, but the use by which they are for which they are intended, because there are certain uses that may be more benign than others.
Yeah, I'll happily drizzle sesame seed oil on my seared ahi.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of some other black seed oil. I know has some
peanut oil
purported benefits.
Yeah.
Peanut oil, but I see no reason to use them in the house. Now, do I freak out? Do I think that they're causal with regards to obesity, as some people often claim, independent of the calories they contain? No. I think that that's primarily likely a calorie issue. Do I freak out when I'm exposed to them in the restaurant setting? No. Do I carry cards with me that say that I'm allergic to canola oil like some do?
Yeah.
No. I don't think it's good to have fear around these foods, but it's worth remembering that they're ultra-processed food ingredients that are highly marketed, highly commercialized. And for that reason, I think it's better to default to for that reason and others, I think it's better to
I would say
to the precautionary principle.
And that precautionary principle would suggest that we know for a fact that extra virgin olive oil and avocado oil are indeed healthy. So at the very least, we know what we can use and get away with if in the absence of anything else, we have access to those.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well said. Well, I'm glad we got to clear up some misconceptions about these fats. I had Sarah Ballantyne on the podcast recently who we had a conversation. It was like a friendly debate.
Yeah.
But I think the more information people have to make their own decisions, the better.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. And, like I say, at the end of the day, it comes down to how do I feel? And if I feel good about going out to a restaurant and not caring for that meal, what was used in the preparation of my salad dressing, because it's otherwise a great salad and a great meal, that's where I'm at. It's like as long as for the remainder of the rest of my life and my lifestyle, I kind of adhere to a set of principles and a set of guidelines, right?
Yeah, and you spend a lot of time in France, right?
Yeah.
In traditional French kitchens, are they using any of these highly refined oils? Or
No, it's almost always
extra virgin olive oil. And
it's
the Mediterranean dietary pattern.
Yeah.
It's associated. I mean, it's like lauded in the medical literature.
No, the best piece of fish I ever had in my life was at a tapas grill in Barcelona, and it was just olive oil and fish. And I watched them make it, and I'm like, oh my God, that's what's possible in the simplest context with some salt and pepper. Yeah.
Yeah. Cook like I think food, the Mediterranean paradigm for eating, I think, is a really good one. I mean, it's been kind of maligned with like this overemphasis, I think, on grain products, and there's this misconception that it's like a low meat, low protein diet, which I don't think is true.
No,
correct me if I'm wrong.
No, we get back to the Blue Zones conversation there about like what you would choose to eat if you could afford it and it was available versus what you have to eat, because of the conditions of the local access and things like that. And the Mediterranean diet has a lot of fish, a lot of pork, a lot of some goat in it, some beef. Yeah.
All that's all my favorite foods.
Yeah. Exactly.
Hey, if you liked that video, you need to check out this one here, and I'll see you there.